Chapter 12. Romance and Other Events. Johnny told Aiko what he had heard the ex-guard tell him. He was all for fleeing into the deep desert for the night, but Aiko insisted that would look suspicious. Reluctantly, Johnny had to agree. Aiko invited him to her sandwich for more tea and some sweets that she had been saving for dessert. Well, one thing led to another, and he wound up in bed with her with some coaxing from Aiko. Gasping and shaking as he made the final thrust inside Aiko, and they were both overcome with a violent orgasm. Crying out together, they clung to each other as if that alone was keeping them from flying apart into particles of pure energy. This was the third time they had come together like this. "Ha ha ha ha," sighed Aiko as Johnny fell forward on top of her. He was not so far gone as to forget to keep his weight on his elbows, but he was close. Was all Johnny could manage to say past his heaving breath. The baby kicked him again and squirmed. Fearing that he was squashing the little guy, Johnny rolled off Aiko onto his back. Aiko gasped and quivered as he withdrew himself, and then she laughed. "What?" he asked curiously as he brought her right hand to his lips to nuzzle and kiss. "I felt that," she said, rolling over to face him and placed her left hand on his belly. "How long has he been kicking you?" Johnny blinked, surprised that she would notice that even in the throes of afterglow. "I just started to feel him when I went to the bathroom in the restaurant." "Oh," was all she said as she marveled at the little vibrations under her left hand. "It's weird," Johnny said, "and marvelous in a strange way." "I think so too," Aiko replied. "I'm scared," he admitted. "I know," she replied. Then she asked in an effort to distract him from his worries about the coming months, "Are we really going to meet a werewolf at our next cargo pickup?" "Actually, a small pack of them," Johnny replied. "Charlie and his wife Lucy and I go way back. They and the rest of their pack are good people." "Do they really change on the full moon, or is that just a myth?" "On the full moon, on the half moon, in full daylight, whenever the mood strikes them," Johnny snorted. "It's the Europeans that come up with those old myths. They're less tolerant of other kinds of people, and they make up stories portraying them as bloodthirsty monsters." She nodded and let her hand travel further down. He was soft now, but he would get hard again in a few minutes if she kept that up. Her hand then traveled down behind his balls. "Thanks for trying, but that won't work," Johnny said as he wiggled a bit to make her stop it. "It'll just hurt and feel strange." Aiko stopped questing for the opening behind his male parts and resumed her earlier ministrations. "It seems unfair you can't have that pleasure too while you're stuck this way. I guess Ellen didn't think of anything else but the one purpose it would be used for," Johnny said. He was having a bit of trouble focusing on the conversation now. "May I see?" she asked curiously. "Sure," he replied as he spread his legs so she could see better. Aiko sat up and leaned over to peek. "It looks a lot like mine, minus the clitoris." "I know. Your hips have gotten wider." "Have they?" "Uh-huh," she said, leaning down closer as if to see him better. Then she began to kiss him intimately where it would feel best. In the end, she wound up on top of him, riding him for all she was worth until they were both spent. Finally, they were able to sleep. They pulled up to the docking bay the next afternoon and were greeted by enthusiastic howls from the werewolves working at the docks. It didn't matter that Johnny and part of his family were disguised. They could smell who they were. The pack leader, Charlie, strode over to Johnny after he stepped out of his sandship. "Hey, Tim, good to see ya!" "Charlie!" Johnny grinned and received a slap on the back and a handshake. Charlie was dusky-skinned, yellow-eyed, and huge. He was the same height as Johnny, but more powerfully built. His mane of shaggy hair was deep reddish-brown. His short, well-trimmed beard and mustache were slightly darker in the shade than the rest of his hair on his head. Handsome with very masculine features and beautiful white smile, he exuded good cheer and charm. He was barefoot with a white sleeveless shirt tucked loosely and neatly into his black breeches and a red silk sash tied to his waist. "Timmy!" called Lucy from the back as she strode forward on high-heeled boots. At first glance, Lucy looked and sounded like a beautiful dusky-skinned woman with yellow-green eyes, athletic build, and long, loosely curling black hair that fell to her waist. She wore a flowing blue satin dress and a long silver chain with a pendant in the shape of a howling wolf's head. Yet if one could more closely look at the features under the well-done makeup, take stock of her broad shoulders and narrow waist, Lucy wasn't remotely female, at least not physically. "Hello, Lou!" Johnny greeted as Lucy came up and gave him an enthusiastic, friendly hug. Johnny reciprocated the embrace with a mental shrug as he often did when he visited Lucy and Charlie. Who was he to judge? Charlie and Lucy's relationship seemed odd to him, but they were undeniably good people. "Where's that darling little girl of yours?" Lucy asked as she looked around for Precious. "I was looking forward to giving her a present." "Oh, you're a lucky man to have such a lovely child." Johnny grinned. "She should be coming out in a minute." "Oh, there she is!" Lucy squealed with girlish delight when she saw Precious in a flowing white cotton dress with half sleeves and sandals. She also wore her necklace charm that made her resemble the round-faced black-haired girl. "Hey, baby girl, come with me to my office. I have a present for you." Precious smiled and looked at Johnny for permission. He nodded and Precious let herself be led away. "Who are your friends over there?" Charlie asked as he spotted Aiko and the 3 rats coming out of the obsidian horse. Goldie had donned her dog illusion, so now she looked like one small black dog and 2 rats. "That's my sister. Lover," Johnny has corrected himself. "Aiko and her 2 rats, Gracie and Rosie, and you know about my dog Jade." Of course I do, Charlie replied as he eyed Aiko appreciatively. He was totally in love with Lucy, but he still admired women. He was the sort that could have gone happily either way. Probably why he liked Lucy so much. He got a lot of both sexes in the same person. And what do you mean, your sister, lover? I didn't know you were into incest. We're not blood related, Aiko clarified as she gracefully received a greeting handshake from Charlie. Goodness, what a vision you are, Charlie declared as he turned the handshake into a courtly bow and a small kiss on the back of her hand before releasing it and standing. Then he asked Johnny, "Why didn't you mention her when we last spoke through the mirrors?" "It's a long story," Johnny hedged. He wasn't sure where his and Aiko's relationship was going just yet. For now, everything seemed too good to be true. Part of him was waiting for something to go terribly wrong. But he tried to remain optimistic. Nothing bad would necessarily happen. It was the doubt that made him shy away from mentioning his newfound romance with Aiko. "I would be happy to hear all about it in my office," Charlie laughed. Under all that rugged good nature was a hopeless romantic, and he relished a good love story. There were several wolf whistles and whoops from the dock workers who had overheard their conversation with their extra-sensitive ears as they worked to unload the cargo. They were all werewolves, powerful built and able to pick up loads that weren't humanly possible. Even the female dock workers with their slighter bills could manage quite well with the big crates. Heavy chains and lifts were used to shift the cargo into floating pallets to be pushed into the warehouse for storage. Aiko smiled, liking the exuberantly friendly wolves as Charlie led the way back to the office where Precious and Lucy were waiting for them. It turned out that Lucy's present to Precious was a frilly pink satin dress tied at the waist with a wide white ribbon, and matching slippers with little bows on the top. Lucy had deftly styled the young dragon's hair back into a French braid, weaving pink ribbons into her hair. She finished by tying the end of the braid with the tail end of the ribbons into a bow that resembled a flower. Precious swung her slippered feet, and he caught the glimpse of the palest pink stockings, so pale they were almost white. Her white dress was draped over the back of the chair she was sitting on, and the sandals hung from the left post of her chair by the heel straps. On the table were 2 shiny pewter pitchers beaded with condensation, a set of 4 pewter cups, and a plate of assorted cookies. There was also a stack of saucers for their clients to use, including the rats. Lucy was humming and smiling in a state of maternal bliss as she finished the last few touches of Precious's hair. Precious looked annoyed, but she was being too polite to say anything. Johnny suspected that his daughter had also been bribed with the sweets on the table. A flicker of a look directed at Johnny flashed across the dragon's features before vanishing under a commencing smile as Lucy came around the front to inspect her handiwork. The look had pleaded, "Help me!" "You look darling," Aiko cooed. Johnny was just wondering how Lucy managed to first convince Precious to change into that get-up, then do it so quickly. He guessed magic was involved as well as bribery, since Lucy did have some talent. He did agree with Aiko, she looked beautiful, but he also understood why she had secretly pleaded for help. Precious liked comfortable clothing that she could quickly strip off. The dress she now wore was a little form-fitting on the torso and fastened with lots of teeny buttons up the back. Johnny also suspected there were feminine undergarments that went with the stockings and dress. Precious hated underwear. It was the only thing Johnny couldn't get her to put on. It was a mark of just how much she liked Lucy to be so restrained by fancy excessively feminine clothes that weren't easy to take off once they were on and without ruining them. "Oh, she does!" Lucy giggled as she did a little dance in place in her pleasure. She poured sweet iced tea into all 4 of the pewter cups before inviting everyone to sit down while she served them. She placed small sugar cookies on saucers in the front of the 3 rats when they appeared on the table, then poured ice water in another saucer for each of them. "You look like a princess," Johnny said honestly as he took his seat next to her while Aiko took her place to his right and Lucy and Charlie took their places across from them. The office was small and crowded with shelves, full of records and books along every available wall space. There was a small desk, neatly stacked with papers, a small standing mirror placed to one side for communicating with clients, an inkwell, and calligraphy pens. Precious smiled, making it look almost like a baring of teeth with a hint of fang. Completely missing the split-second show of fangs, Lucy cooed and picked a selection of cookies for Precious to sample. Resigned, Precious made a genuine effort to be gracious, smiling at Lucy and thanking her for the cookies. She selected one in the most ladylike fashion and began to nibble on a fudge chocolate cookie. "Do you have an order for me?" Johnny asked the werewolves. "We have 2 orders from the same person," Charlie said as he stood up and went to the other desk, having forgotten to fetch them before he sat down at the table. He returned and handed them to Johnny. Johnny took them and was briefly distracted by the sight of his canine companion eating a cookie in a most undog-like fashion. It looked odd to see a dog pick up a cookie with her forepaws and bring it up to her mouth, to nibble at it. Fortunately, Charlie and Lucy already knew she wasn't really a dog, and they could completely trust it not to go running to Richard. "I think you can handle it and all that you have a partner," Charlie said. "And for this one, you'll need a partner. The order is quite large." Johnny raised an eyebrow when he saw the list of cargo he was being offered to haul. One order was just foodstuffs and various other necessary supplies to restock the palace and some small packages that a number of residences there had ordered us for personal reasons. There was even a large box of letters being sent to the palace staff, mostly in family and friend correspondences, according to the manifest. He and Aiko would indeed have to haul the lot together if he was going to take the job. There was one other parcel that he was to take along with the other supplies, one that made him fume quietly and feel sorry for them all at once. He thought it best to food supplies be left alone for once. The pest infesting the castle needed to eat too. Besides, a great many people that worked in the cargo business were pushing their luck with all the trouble making with Johnny's encouragement. There had been a rash of inspections ordered by Richard himself. For the sake of self-preservation, they had to stop losing the cargo or delivering contaminated goods to the palace. For the time being, they were laying low and trying to think of other ways to subtly rebel and subvert the king's rule. Many people knew about Elena's quiet campaign, gathering allies and forces, though they knew nothing of the exact details. It was only a matter of time before her army was strong enough to take down her brother. She had managed to spread the truth of how Richard had gained the throne, so naturally she'd had a lot of sympathizers in the general public. There was some opposition and a lot of other people that didn't give a crap either way for one reason or another. No ruler, no matter how good a person they were, could please everyone. It was just the way of things. Johnny had quit stealing from the palace after the first 2 months when he heard of the inspections. He couldn't afford to attract attention to himself or to his family. They couldn't injure or kill him thanks to the Green Ward, but they could still restrain him. Green Wards were tricky to cast, and there was some health risk to if it was left in place for too long on a person. The small amount of energy to keep the spell running had to come from somewhere, and that was from Johnny's own body. Ellen knew that and had created the green ward so it would end just before he went into labor, as it might interfere with the maternity spell and cause something to go wrong during the birth. She had created a delicate balance between the two spells so they wouldn't cancel each other out or draw too much energy from himself or her baby. Richard's Black Witch might also know the green ward couldn't stay in place indefinitely, and he would inform his employer. All they would have to do was wait until the war was down, then kill them both. Concubines? Johnny asked Charlie more calmly than he felt as he looked up at his friend after he finished reading the cargo manifest. This was the inclusion of this cargo that had him so angry. Yep, Charlie confirmed unhappily. Bound for King Richard, he's reinstating the practice of harems. His father and grandfather were not perfect when they came to making laws, but they did do some good things, such as stopping the practice of harems. That filthy good-for-nothing royal pain in the ass! Exclaimed Lucy vehemently. I sincerely hope you can arrange for your cargo to be stolen en route to the palace. Those girls don't deserve a life as sex slaves. How many? Johnny asked as he sincerely considered taking the job. He couldn't save every slave he encountered. It was impossible, but he helped who he could when he could. The job would be risky since he would require that he go to the palace loading docks. Yet he knew the sort of girls that would often wound up as concubines, and they would be girls, not mature women, knowing Richard, the sick bastard. He would have to continue to trust Ling's magic to keep himself and the other members of his family hidden in plain sight. About 30 being held in one of the warehouse slave cages, Lucy said with a look of utter distaste. They didn't like dealing with the slave trade, but they had no choice. By law, they had to handle whatever legal goods came to their docks, and slaves were legal cargo. We're making them as comfortable as possible. They are the best quality slaves. The girls are to be treated with extra care, so their keeper isn't suspicious of why we're treating them so well. Johnny nodded. He could handle 30 passengers in his cargo hold once the first segment behind the main living area was emptied out. There were a few small details he would have to work out, but he was certain it wouldn't be a problem. It helped that the palace was only a 2-day trip, and they had to cross the outer fringes of the Dragon Clan's territories from the oasis town where Charlie's cargo station was located. The area was notoriously known as being a place where cargo runners were at risk of being robbed of their goods by various bands of thieves. The rumors were true, yet exaggerated. The Dragon's clans didn't like the competition in their area and frequently policed their territory for other would-be thieves, either by capturing them or chasing them off their lands. Travel through the Dragon Clan's territory was still risky, but not as much as it could be thanks to their vigilance. Still, Johnny knew he could use the rumors to his advantage when it came to helping the concubines. The Dragon clans never robbed him unless he asked them to, and only a rare few people knew of his connection to them. No one was suspected of him planning to sabotage his own cargo run. I would have to contact my parents, Johnny said after a moment's hesitation. We know the drill, Charlie smiled patiently, looking hopeful. I can't promise they will agree, Johnny said. Rich will be less than pleased to lose his harem, which can cause problems for the Dragon clans. Completely understandable, Charlie agreed. Aiko kicked him gently and stared significantly in the direction of his rounded belly, then at his face. Then another communicated her objections of taking cargo directly to the palace. They had been avoiding taking on cargo they would have to deliver to the palace as an extra precaution. Johnny and Aiko had been full agreement on this point, but with the need to rescue some young damsels in distress, he thought the risk was worth taking. He really couldn't stand the idea of those girls being forced in to become mistresses for the king. Johnny could be cold and ruthless when necessity demanded it, but he was not heartless, and he cared about people. It was the reason he turned thief now and again. When the law fell short of the needs of the people, Johnny did what he could to get around the law and get what was needed for them. He'd be a completely honest trader only when the laws changed to better serve the people it was meant to govern. Until then, he would remain in the habit of being a clever thief. He knew what it was like to be taken as a slave, and he hated the idea of anyone who would have to go through what he'd had experienced as a young boy. "What's all that about?" Charlie asked him. "A private matter," Johnny said uncomfortably as the baby began to move around beside him and as if in sympathy. Lucy was cocking her head in the sudden near silence, looking curiously at them both. The only sounds now were the soft munching the rats were making as they nibbled on their sugar cookies and watched their people. "It's nothing you need to concern yourselves about," Johnny said quickly to fill the silence. Werewolves had notoriously sharp hearing. At this close range they could make out everyone's heartbeats, and Johnny suspected Lucy was hearing them all, including the baby's teeny heartbeats. They could have missed the sounds of their hearts in the din of the warehouse and the noise of the conversation, but in the awkward silence, if they were paying close attention. Out of the corner of his eye he saw Precious catch on to what Lucy was doing and twitch an ear in Johnny's direction. Her hearing was excellent, too. She must have heard something because she picked up a crunchy cookie and began to munch it loudly, making more noise. Johnny coughed and picked up his cup of tea and took a swallow before saying to Charlie, "We'll take the job. At the very least we can see to it those girls are well treated on the way to the palace." "The slaver will want to go with and ensure that he gets paid and his slaves are delivered," Ago argued. "Especially if they are his finest quality stock." "I can handle him," Johnny said confidently. "I've dealt with such scum before." "What of Precious and Goldie?" Ago asked pointedly. "Even if no one recognizes them, they could still be in danger." "We know how to deal with slavers," Precious said after she swallowed a bite of cookie. "We don't talk to them and hide as much as possible." "You could come with me," Ago said, resigned. "I can see that I'm not going to convince Johnny not to take the job. At least you won't be in the same ship as the slaver." She knew once Johnny decided something, it was of little use to argue with him, especially when it came to the rescue of slaves. She sympathized with his intentions, but she was also thinking of their long-term goals. Better to keep a low profile, and arranging for his cargo to be stolen could cause them more trouble than it was worth. "Thanks, but I want to stay with him," Precious said with a typical dragon stubbornness. Hints of yellow-green were flashing under the illusory dark browns of her irises as she set her jaw. "I need him and he needs me," and for extra emphasis she said, "He's my chosen rider. I can't carry him now because I'm too small, but I will someday." Ago gaped at her. For a dragon to say such a thing was an announcement of a lifetime partnership and a declaration of absolute love and trust. Not many dragons picked riders, but when they did, their riders counted themselves very fortunate to be so loved, and they loved their dragon partners right back just as fiercely. Dragon and rider would have each other's backs through thick and thin, and once the bond was made, nothing could break it. Ago had known Precious had picked Johnny as her rider as well as choosing him as a parent. She knew Precious loved Johnny, but it never occurred to her that Precious might also choose him as a rider. Johnny had known ever since she had found her true name, but thought it best to keep it between himself and Precious until she decided to tell someone besides himself. "She'll be fine," Johnny reassured Ago as he glanced at Precious and gave her a loving look. "Communication mirrors available," Charlie said. He looked a bit uncomfortable being witness to their disagreement, and he was trying to shift the subject to something less awkward. The man had always been more of a lover than a fighter. "Dear, are you pregnant?" Lucy asked Ago with a mildly confused expression on her face. She had been listening intently through the entire conversation, and she could just make out the baby's heartbeats in Johnny's and Ago's vicinity. Her ears were informing of one thing, while her preconceptions were telling her something else, confusing her. "Uh-oh," Johnny thought as he shifted uncomfortably. The baby squirmed and kicked again. His nephew was becoming quite active at the moment, making his heart rate increase. Johnny knew that Lucy would be very interested in his condition and would be extremely jealous. She and Charlie couldn't have any babies of their own, obviously, at least not without some magical help. The questions would be awkward, embarrassing, and Johnny wouldn't be able to answer them anyway. The fewer people that knew about his condition, the better. Just then a tall, pinch-faced man in a blue and red silk robes, and a short, bushy beard, and thick eyebrows, came in and politely greeted Charlie. Then he turned to Johnny and Ago and said, "Hello, I'm Ali. I was told the cargo runners I needed to speak to were in here in Charlie's office." "Are you them?" Relieved for the distraction, Johnny smiled and replied, "Yes, you have the right people. We're just going over the cargo manifests." "I prefer that my slaves are housed in the larger ship," Ali said. "My girls must have the best accommodations. They're too expensive to risk any damage to them."